webinar with our first speaker of the session, Dr. Radhika Natarajan, who's the Deputy Director, Department of Cornea and Refractive Surgery, Head of the Department of Teaching and Training at Shankar Nethralaya, Chennai. And she is going to be talking on a very relevant topic, corneoscleral tear and adjuvant repair. On to you, Dr. Radhika.
Thank you, Dr. Chitra. Thanks to AOS and in particular to Dr. Chitra for the wonderful job that she is doing and also for having me here. I'm Radhika from Shankar Nethralaya. I am going to talk to you on corneoscleral tear repair. Can you see my slides?
Yes.
So the ocular trauma score takes into account the vision at the time of injury, the condition of the retina and the optic nerve, as well as presence of infection, and it gives a value. So this is important because sometimes we feel that the tear is simple, so the senior resident can repair, whereas complex tears, the surgeon will be called. But actually in simple tears, when the OTS is good, then the prognosis is excellent. So it also deserves our full attention. Starting with corneal wounds, if there is a partial thickness laceration, a Siedel's test is important. You can see in the picture that there is a flap tear, but the Siedel shows that the aqueous is diluting the fluorescein, which means there is a full thickness component somewhere. When there is an undisplaced clean flap, then it can be left to heal spontaneously under supervision. But let's see what happens when the flap is displaced like this. You can see that it has become necrotic because it loses its nutrition. It's moved away from the bed, and the outpouring of inflammation has caused a hypopyon. So we have cleaned the flap. We have cleaned the bed to prevent epithelial ingrowth. We have put the flap back with glue and sutures. And you can see in the second picture, it's healing beautifully and the hypopyon is resolved. So some flap tears need to be sutured as well. When there is a full thickness corneal tear, first thing you do is a wound toilet to prevent infection. But you must remember that in an open globe, no povidone iodine or no topical antibiotics, because these will get inside the eye and set up severe toxicity. So the wound edges need to be aligned. I'll show you in a minute how. The corneal tissue should never be grabbed or excised. Every bit of the cornea, if it is excised, it makes it difficult for the wound to be closed and causes severe postoperative astigmatism. So every bit of cornea should be put back in the jigsaw, however macerated it looks. The wound should never be held for traction and never enter the anterior chamber through the wound. It always has to be through a dedicated side port incision. Partial thickness sutures have the advantage that they are less infection prone. Full thickness sutures have the advantage that the posterior wound closes to aqueous, so the edema reduces quickly, as you can see in the second picture, but partial thickness bites are always safer. Perpendicular wounds, you can make equidistant suturing, but when the wound is shelved, then the suture on the epithelial side on one side, the length should be equal to the suture on the endothelial side on the other side, as you can see in that picture. So that makes the suturing equidistant. This slide shows three cardinal principles of corneoscleral repair, of which short videos I'll be showing. The first picture shows that the first bite should be taken at the limbus. Why? Because it is the known anatomical landmark, so it prevents wound skewing. Then you suture the cornea and then you go along to the sclera. The second picture shows that the peripheral suturing of the cornea, the suture should be longer and become shorter as they come to the center, because this maintains the normal natural prolate shape of the cornea, which is steeper in the center and flatter in the periphery. Lastly, if there is an angular wound, then the fork needs to be sutured first, so that immediately it converts it into two linear wounds, which can then be sutured. How many sutures should you put for a wound? This picture shows that the length of each suture holds as much as the corneal wound, which it straddles. So the distance between two sutures should be equal to or less than the length of one suture bite. So longer the sutures, the less number of sutures you will need. Again, the ends are sutured first, the bends are sutured first, then the ends, then you come to the middle. So this is a short video which showcases all of this. We have created a model wound, as you can see over there. The first suture is at the limbus. Then the bends. The needle should always be perpendicular to the wound. It should not be pointing towards the surgeon. One suture bite length between two sutures is optimal, and never tighten progressively. If you tighten like this, then the previous suture becomes loose. So star-shaped wounds are more difficult to handle. If there is a stellate wound, then the purse-string suture helps. Then it immediately converts the wound into multiple linear wounds, and then you can suture. But the most important difficulty here is the apex. Sometimes it fish mouths, it is difficult to seal. So you should not tighten the earlier linear wound sutures too much. That helps. And if there is fish mouthing, what is to be avoided is more and more tight sutures because it compounds the situation. You can place a tiny drop of cyanoacrylate glue at the apex to close the fish mouthing. But remember, it should not be a big blob of glue. Then that will entangle into the sutures and produce a counterproductive effect. If iris prolapse is the earlier, we were taught that the treatment should depend on the timing of the prolapse. But now we know that unless the iris is very contaminated or necrotic, then we don't have to remove that iris. So clean iris like this is a 1-day-old wound, but still the iris is clean. So it was washed nicely and put back and sutured like so. So this prevents glare as well as glaucoma. Now, once the wound heals, comes the question of suture removal, which can be done earlier in children because they heal faster and later in adults. Wound healing depends on a lot of factors: the type of the wound, the kind of suturing, the alignment, presence of infection, tissue loss, steroid use, everything. So how do we know that the wound has healed? You can see in the picture what are called as healing lines of fibrosis. Those white lines along the wound and along the suture tracks tell us that the wound has healed nicely. So when that happens, the wound is ready for suture removal. If we are still in doubt, we can remove alternate suture followed by alternate suture to prevent a wound gape on the slit lamp table. And it is always best to be very sterile while doing it, because even a small suture removal can set up corneal abscess or even endophthalmitis. How do we deal with this scar? The PROS contact lens has come as a boon for us. Originally used for keratoconus, the PROS lens is a scleral lens which has a fluid reservoir behind, which serves many purposes. It helps in the fitment, it helps in the comfort, and most importantly, the fluid film gives better optical clarity. So all medium and severe scars should be checked with PROS lens before a keratoplasty is planned. Moving to scleral wounds, we saw that the sclera should be closed after the cornea. And when there is a radial tear running under the lid, you close as you go, which I will show. And very posterior wound can be left unsutured to heal in the orbit. The most important thing about scleral wound is sclera is avascular. So you have to close the conjunctiva over the wound. Otherwise, you might have done a good job, but there will be necrosis or infection. For sclera, thicker suture needs to be used. It could be Vicryl or nylon. So here you can see a radial tear which is running under the lid. Only half the tear you can see in the right side picture. So you take 2 sutures and then leave the ends long so that you can rotate the globe down, and then the other hand can continue suture. So rotate down and suture with the other hand. This is the hand over hand technique of exposing and suturing long radial scleral tears. When you see something like this after an injury, the anterior chamber is disorganized, there's large subconjunctival hemorrhage, but you don't actually see a tear. But you have every business to suspect one, especially a circumferential tear, when you see this picture. How to expose and close? You open the conjunctiva to expose the tear. Open the ends, locate the ends so that you know the extent. Tenons should be opened up for suturing. Passive hemostasis works best. Central bite first for circumferential tears. Never poke the choroid. You can have a hemorrhage or worse still an RD. Divide the wound in equal parts with the suture first. The extreme end has to be secured, otherwise it will be leaking and hypotonous. Then the anterior chamber is open, loose lens matter is removed, you check for vitreous, close the side port, and then the conjunctiva is closed. So when there is a conjunctival tear, it is best exposed by putting fluorescein. You can see it's highlighted over there, and then you can close it with glue or sutures. The lower panel shows that there is a Tenon's prolapse. You have to look for it. If you don't expose or excise the tenons, then you can have a granuloma or an infection after the conjunctival tear is repaired. I'll quickly relate this case of a 10-year-old boy who was diagnosed to have episcleritis recurrently. Episcleritis is rare in this age group. Turned out that he had an injury and he was recurrently treated with steroids, and that injury was not allowed to heal. When we instilled fluorescein, we saw that area of stippling, and that edema around was because of the rawness. So we removed all the steroid, we put him on lubricants and patch, and then he healed completely. So like recurrent corneal erosion, recurrent conjunctival erosion was diagnosed in this boy by history and by fluorescein staining. A quick look at foreign bodies. Rust rings can be left alone. If you have superficial foreign bodies like this, they can be nicked with a needle on the slit lamp. Deeper ones, which you can see on that ASOCT, if you dig around, it will fall inside the anterior chamber or create a perforation. So I've shown you a schematic where you can create a trap door to expose the foreign body better. It becomes more accessible and then you can remove it. Best thing is, even if you have a perforation, you can put the flap back and close it. When you have a blast wound and multiple foreign bodies like this, most of them are inert. If you dig around, then that can cause more harm. So they can be watched and removed if they become superficial or get infected. Lastly, trauma changes the life of a healthy patient instantaneously, the poor patient. But the one small blessing is that the traumatized tissue—
Ma'am, you have 1 minute remaining.
Yes, please. The traumatized tissue was healthy tissue. So seldom is a keratoplasty required for primary wound repair. But there are exceptional situations where there is extensive loss, like post-RK injury where the pies are coming in your hand, or the post-LASIK injury where the flap is lost. Then we may have to resort to LK or PK as primary wound repair. Here is a case of osteogenesis imperfecta. In the picture, you can see the blue sclera and the wafer-thin cornea. This boy presented with a burst globe due to trivial trauma, and we have reported penetrating keratoplasty as a globe-saving procedure in fragile cornea. Thank you very much. Thanks again for having me here.
That was a wonderful talk, Radhika. I had lined up so many questions, but how precisely, like tick marks, you answered of nearly all of them. But I just wanted to clarify that in the scleral wound, you can suture as far posteriorly. But if it is far posterior, I suppose you could even leave them unsutured, right? Am I right in that?
Yes, the hand-over-hand technique helps us to roll the globe down and access the tear as posteriorly as possible. What happens when it is very far back is that the digging causes more problem with the optic nerve, and it can set up orbital cellulitis. And it is a closed chamber over there. So the very posterior part is sheathed by tenons and the posterior part of the orbit, so it heals spontaneously. So digging over there causes, it's not the ideal thing to do, but if it's running up to the macula, then we may not want to touch it over there.
Dr. Purendra Bhasin, I have a question for you, and of course Radhika can answer. Supposing you have had a corneal tear repair also and you want to do a cataract surgery also. So when you are planning to implant the IOL, what would be your incision? Would you like to go corneal or would you like to do scleral in these cases?
Thank you. First of all, I would like to congratulate and really appreciate the way Dr. Radhika has presented his talk. It was such a lucid and vivid, and almost everything has been covered. And this is a good question, Dr. Chitra, what you are saying. First thing is that to address the cataract, what I do is I prefer doing a two-stage surgery for placing the IOL. When the cataract anterior lens capsule is ruptured and the loose cortex is there in this with the traumatic perforating injury, so in such a condition, I remove the cataract, loose cortex, and if any hyphema or blood clots are present in the anterior chamber, we go through the separate wound, separate side port, and remove them and remove the cataract. But I don't prefer putting an IOL in the same sitting. I go for a second stage for the cataract for the IOL. And that can be, the choice could be more, I prefer in older patients, I prefer corneal wound, and otherwise in very young patients, we can have sclerocorneal. That is what I do.
Dr. Radhika, keeping in view that the corneal tear repair has been done, so would you want to stay away from the cornea to create an incision, or would you prefer a scleral route?
Not really. It entirely depends on the site of the scar and where the wound has healed. So we know the surgical principle that we don't want to violate a scar, A, because the tissue will retract, and B, because the healing will be poor in that site. So as long as we steer clear of the corneal scar, if the space away from the scar gives allowance for the surgeon to operate, a corneal wound will not do any extra harm. So that depends on the surgeon. If it's a slightly clean-cut wound, we may even choose a location which will counter the astigmatism.
Oh, good.
Deep meridian we can use, and we prefer the clear cornea away from the wound, away from the scar.
Srinivas, you have anything to ask? I have
Yeah,
one more.
Radhika madam, wonderful presentation.
Thank you,
Almost
Dr.
all the points are covered, as Chitra madam said. Two quick questions. In case of iris prolapse, as you mentioned, many of them have the doubt whether to excise or not to excise, or whether to repose it. So what are your 1, 2, 3 tips on that? And secondly, what are the tips for the scleral patch grafts, especially when zone 2 or zone 3 injuries? I had a recent case, not so recent, it's almost 6 months back, where the posterior edge was not sutured. The patient had retinal detachment. The moment I tried to go in, things were going good. Increase the pressure, it gave away. So in these cases, should we kind of resect the muscle and try to close when it's associated with retinal detachment? Your tips on that, madam, please.
Yeah, the second question is going to take a whole webinar talk on its own, but I'll cover it as quickly as possible. The first question being that iris tissue, how to handle. I mentioned it during my talk. It's a very important point because we have the standard teaching that if the iris has stayed out for more than 6 hours, 8 hours, we have to remove. Not really. There's no scientific basis for that. Only condition is you look at the damage to the iris. If the iris is fresh looking, then we have to wash it nicely. A, to prevent infection, and B, to prevent epithelial ingrowth. You can have intractable iris cyst formation both from the pigment as well as the non-pigment epithelium as well as the surface epithelium growing inside. I had a patient last week also with a recurrent cyst. So that becomes very difficult to eradicate. So the washing and the toilet is important without any antibiotic or povidone because those can't get into the eye. But fresh iris can always be reposited. Why? Because glare is a severe problem in these patients. We just leave a big gaping hole in the iris, then they have intractable glare. And also loose flapping iris sticks here and there with synechia formation, it leads to glaucoma. But then if the iris is macerated, gray looking, infected, then you don't want it to create inflammation or infection inside the eye. That kind of an iris alone needs to be excised. Otherwise, you don't have to. Regarding the second question, the prospect of doing a scleral patch graft in an open globe is easier said than done. I know all of us in this panel have done wound repair, so we understand the complexity. But that said, there are certain giveaway points. It is very imperative to take a minute to examine the wound under anesthesia before we put the knife or the suture to it on the operating table, because the patient is very much uncooperative on the slit lamp because he suffered physical and mental trauma. So we open and we take a good 5 minutes to take a look. There are some telltale signs. You can see bluish areas. You can see brownish areas around the actual wound. You can see unexplained subconjunctival hemorrhage, or you can see old cataract scar. Also important to examine the other eye is a good giveaway to the scleral tensile strength. Patient may be high myope, so examine the other eye also. Then we can keep sclera ready, but disinserting the muscle when the eye is collapsed is just not possible. The eye has to be formed for us to disinsert the muscle. If we are able to form the eye, then what you can do is to use a universal eye speculum that exposes a lot. And also you can take traction sutures at the limbus. After the globe is formed, you can take traction sutures at the limbus, which when you prolapse down, exposes more of the posterior sclera. And the third tip that I have found useful is to use passive hemostasis. You go on cauterizing, you'll create more and more bleeding because you're blindly fishing around. So passive hemostasis with or without adrenaline, and rotating the globe down with traction sutures after the eye has formed a little bit helps in exposing the tear. And the last bit of advice that I have is sometimes you can use donor cornea, partial thickness donor cornea rather than donor sclera to kind of glue it onto the area of dehiscence and then take a few sutures, because their visibility is better, handling is better, so you don't have to always use sclera for sclera. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah. Wonderful.
Yeah,
Thank
amazing
you. Thank you.
amazing discussion.
Yeah,
I think
one small comment. Radhika, wonderful talk as
you,
usual.
sir.
You see, do you believe in prophylactic antibiotics in intraocular, especially in bad lacerated wounds, especially in a rural setups, especially with vegetable matter? Do you believe in that?
Sir, if I suspect a fungal infection is going to be possible, sometimes we irrigate intracamerally with voriconazole or amphotericin, but as a routine, no. Because when the blood aqueous barrier is broken, that is the only instance when systemic antibiotic will work. Normally, when the patient takes a tablet or gets an IV, it never gets into the eye. But here, the blood aqueous barrier is broken. So there's every chance that it can percolate into the eye. So we do, for the time of admission, give systemic antibiotics, but routine intracameral, not really.
Thank you very much. It's
Can I
endless.
say one thing? I mean, we should give one message that all these cases should be done under general anesthesia.
Yes.
That is what is very, very important. And other thing is to look at the extent of the wound, and then you apply the speculum, what kind of speculum you are going to use, or maybe you can retract it with the suture, something, so that you should not put more pressure on the eyeball, on the globe, so that because I have seen cases wherein there is everything has expulsed out because of the undue pressure which has been created on the globe. Thank you, Dr. Radhika.
Thank you,
Thank you so
Radhika.
much.
That was an amazing talk and great discussion.